He was an incredible athlete, a defensive anchor, and a premier intimidator. Whether he was up ahead, running down one of the sidelines, or trailing, Kenyon Martin was on his way to the bucket with a full head of steam, and you didn't want to be in his way. He excelled due to his athleticism and explosiveness, which resulted in him being a nightmare on the offensive glass, as well as one of the best help defenders in the game. He may not have operated exclusively out of the post, like a more traditional forward, but the fact of the matter is that coming out of college, he never really gave the indication that he would be a polished post performer. He showed exactly who he was as a player during college, and put together a great NBA career being exactly that player. He was at his best in New Jersey alongside Jason Kidd and Richard Jefferson, making back-to-back finals appearances. But after he was traded to Denver, injuries plagued the rest of his career. Yet it was at this time that he was able to stick around as an effective player for years by retaining his toughness and hustle play, as well as improving his mid-range shot to make up for the lost explosiveness. But even into his later years, Martin could still catch you on a poster or come from out of nowhere for a huge block. He can get a bad rap for his production and availability in Denver, but he fought through a lot to play as often as he could. And only looking at his New Jersey years, K-Mart was a type of player that didn't come around often and took the game seriously on both ends of the floor. Let's jog your memory. A Michigan native, Kenyon Martin spent his teenage years in Texas, bouncing around a few high schools. He would start at Roosevelt High in Lubbock, Texas, then transferred to Tyler Street Christian Academy in Dallas the following year, before spending his last 2 years at Bryan Adams High, also in Dallas. As a senior at Bryan Adams, Martin averaged 19.1 points, 12.5 rebounds, and 6.4 blocks per game. He wasn't considered a top prospect in the nation after high school, but he was still intriguing, as Cincinnati would offer him a scholarship which he would accept, and he would be playing for Bob Huggins and the Bearcats going into his 97 freshman season. The Bearcats were led by star forward Danny Fortson and had welcomed JUCO transfer Ruben Patterson this year as well. And Martin wouldn't see the court too often as a freshman. He would miss the first 10 games of the year as he was completing his requirements for freshman eligibility. And when he did start playing, he was only getting about 10.5 minutes per game and putting up modest numbers, with his one highlight being that he led the team in blocks, as he averaged over 1 per game. But the Bearcats were a good team, and they would even begin the year ranked number 1 in the nation. Yet after a 24-6 regular season, they would finish ranked 9th. Then after losing to Marquette in the conference tournament quarterfinals, they would enter the NCAA tournament as a 3 seed. The first round brought Butler, with Martin putting up 3 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 blocks, but also only playing 14 minutes and getting into foul trouble. Yet the Bearcats won to advance to a second round matchup with Iowa State. Yet with this game being much closer, Martin would only get 5 minutes and finish with a foul and a turnover, as Cincinnati lost by 1 to end their season, with Martin's freshman year seeing him average about 3 points, 3.5 rebounds, and a block per game. Fortson was gone going into the 98 season, which meant there was an empty spot in the starting lineup, and Martin would be slotted in as the team's starting center. Cincinnati would have one of the best starting fives in the nation, even though Patterson would appear in just 19 games. Martin was the only starter not to average double-figure scoring, but he would lead the team in rebounds and really establish himself as an elite defender by averaging a steal per game, as well as a conference-leading 2.8 blocks per game. And he would shoot nearly 63% from the field. The Bearcats were unranked to start the year, but after a 4-2 start, they would rattle off 10 straight wins and rank as high as number 21. But they would go just 3-2 to close out the year, finishing at 17-4. But in the conference tournament, they would defeat Louisville, UAB, and then UNC Charlotte in the final to take home the Conference USA title, which would earn them an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. The 2-seeded Bearcats would get 15-seeded Northern Arizona in round 1, but this would be an unexpectedly close game, as Cincinnati won by just 3 after a second-half comeback, as Martin had 9 points, but also had 2 steals, 2 blocks, and 15 rebounds, with 10 of them coming on the offensive glass. But after avoiding a first-round upset, they were shocked by a second-round upset, as they fell to West Virginia after a last-second Gerard West shot, ending their season abruptly, as Martin's sophomore year saw him average about 10 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 blocks per game. Patterson was gone going into 99, but Martin still wouldn't take that next step offensively. His scoring had slightly improved as he was one of 3 players to average double figures, but his rebounding and block numbers dropped. Yet he would still lead the conference in blocks, as he remained a dominant defensive anchor for a top 20 scoring defense in the nation. And Martin would eventually be named first team all-conference. Cincinnati would begin the season ranked number 17, but started on a tear, as they would win their first 15 games and rank as high as number 3. And this winning streak had included a 2-point upset over number 1 Duke in the Great Alaska Shootout, with Martin making a great assist on the game-winning bucket. They would cool off a little bit over the remaining 14 games as they would go 10-4 with the late season 3-game losing streak, as they would end the regular season at 25-4. They couldn't repeat as Conference USA champs, as after a defeat of USF in the quarterfinals, they would lose to UNC Charlotte in the semis, but they would still earn an NCAA tournament berth as a 3 seed. Round 1 brought George Mason, who Cincinnati would hold to below 50 points in an easy win, as Martin would have 10 points and 6 rebounds, but played only 17 minutes. But the Bearcats' second round curse continued as they would fall to Temple, with Martin putting up 16 points and 8 rebounds on 7 of 9 shooting before fouling out late in the game, as his junior year would see him average about 10 points, 7 rebounds, and 2.5 blocks per game. Up to this point, Martin seemed content with being a defensive star who deferred on offense, but over the summer he would try out for Team USA to play in the World University Games. And it was at this time, going against the top players in the nation, that he realized he was the best player in the gym, which likely motivated him to improve his offensive game, but also gave him much needed confidence, as during the games he would lead the team in scoring as they went 8-0 and won the gold, and that confidence seemed to carry over, as Martin was on a mission during his senior year. The Bearcats had a couple great incoming freshmen in DeMar Johnson and Kenny Satterfield, and Martin along with fellow senior Pete Michael would be the team leaders. But Martin would have an incredible year. He upped his scoring to nearly 19 points, while pulling down nearly 10 rebounds and blocking 3.5 shots per game, as he would finish second in the conference in rebounding, while leading the conference in both scoring and blocks. And on top of that, he would lead the conference in field goal percentage at nearly 57%. Cincinnati began the year ranked number 1 and would start the season 8-0, before losing to Xavier and falling to number 4. But they would win their next 16 before losing one more game to Temple, then winning out the rest of the way to finish their regular season at 28-2. And Martin had put together some legendary performances, as he had a huge game versus Memphis, where he blocked 6 shots in the first 6 minutes, and would also have a 33-point, 16-rebound performance versus UAB. But his most memorable performance came during the second last game of the season versus DePaul. They were without Michael and trailed by 10 with less than 4 minutes left, before Martin completely took over, scoring 10 of the team's final 14 points and assisting on DeMar Johnson's game winner. So going into the conference tournament, the Bearcats were the top-ranked team in the nation and title favorites, as they featured Kenyon Martin, who would be voted first-team All-Conference, Conference Player of the Year, a consensus first-team All-American, and the National College Player of the Year. They would take on St. Louis in the quarterfinals, but just 3 minutes into the game, the Bearcats were dealt a crushing blow.
Is the absolute worst nightmare. The postseason begins as the game's best player on the country's best team sees his college career come to an immediate end.
Martin would go to set a screen on the Billikens' Justin Love, and in a freak accident, he would slip and land awkwardly on his right leg. He knew instantly that he was hurt, and you could tell by the injury. And later the news would come out that he fractured his fibula and tore ligaments in his ankle, which would end his year and pretty much crush the title hopes of Cincinnati, as they would lose to St. Louis, then eventually lose to Tulsa in the second round of the NCAA tournament. As this brought a tragic end to a great season, which saw Martin average about 19 points, 9.5 rebounds, and 3.5 blocks per game. If not for the injury, Martin was pretty much a lock as the first overall pick in the 2000 NBA draft, which was also one of the weaker drafts in history. But now it was more up in the air. Were teams going to be scared away after such a terrible injury? But by draft night, Martin was reportedly almost completely healed. The screws had been removed from his leg, and he had about a month left of recovery. And then Commissioner Stern came to the podium to announce the first pick of the draft.
With the first pick in the 2000 NBA draft, the New Jersey Nets select Kenyon Martin from the University of Cincinnati.
A teary-eyed Martin looked to be walking fine as he approached the stage, and the Nets clearly weren't scared away because of the injury, as they reportedly had declined multiple trade offers for the number 1 pick, because they knew Martin was the perfect fit for them. The Nets weren't a great team, but they had some good young talent, led by point guard Stephon Marbury. But they were in desperate need of a big man who could rebound and block shots after losing forward Jason Williams to a career-ending injury. So Martin was able to heal up completely by opening night, as he would start and put up 10 points and 7 boards in 30 minutes of action before fouling out in a loss to Cleveland. As overall, Martin would play and start in 68 games this season, finishing as the team's 3rd leading scorer, leading rebounder, and top shot blocker. yet he would struggle with fouls, as his 281 were the 7th most in the league. Martin would also finish top 2 among rookies in scoring, rebounding, steals, and blocks, yet would only finish 2nd in Rookie of the Year voting to Orlando's Mike Miller, but he would still be named first-team All-Rookie. Overall, Martin would hit double figures in 42 games, including 11 double-doubles and 1 triple-double, when he had 18 points, 15 rebounds, and 11 assists in a March 5th loss to Milwaukee. But even with the addition of Martin and a new coach in Byron Scott, the Nets had a worse finish than the year before, but this was partially due to Keith Van Horn being limited to just 47 games, as the Nets would finish at 26-56 and miss the playoffs, as Martin's rookie year saw him average about 12 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. A big change came in the offseason as New Jersey and Phoenix pulled off a blockbuster deal, which was essentially a point guard swap, as Marbury became a Phoenix Sun, with Jason Kidd, who was arguably the league's best point guard at the time, coming to New Jersey. And on top of this, they had drafted the super athletic Richard Jefferson out of Arizona, so getting a guy like Kidd, who was an elite passer and excelled in transition, was about to help a second-year Martin reach a new level. 2002 would mark the beginning of the most impressive stretch of Martin's career. He would see his scoring go up, and even though it was less than 15 points per game, he would lead the team. He would also drop to the team's 3rd leading rebounder, pulling down over 2 less rebounds per game than he did as a rookie. But this was more of a product of the Nets' game plan, on top of Martin sometimes ending up on the perimeter on defense, due to his ability to guard wing players if needed. He would also excel in the transition game, as Kidd had a habit of taking the ball coast to coast off his own rebounds. And Martin would also find himself often leaking out on missed shots to get a jump on the break, setting him up for some emphatic slams. He would once again lead the team in blocks as the only player on the team to average at least a block and a steal per game. He would still hit double figures in 58 games and record his first career 30-point game in a December 19th win over Minnesota, when he had 31 points on nearly 67% shooting. But his lower rebound numbers would only see him record 2 double-doubles this year, and he would miss 7 games this season due to suspensions both from fighting and flagrant fouls, as he developed a bit of a reputation as a dirty player. The Nets played at a top 10 pace in the league, and while they had a solid scoring offense, their scoring defense would be top 5, and this would lead to a massive improvement on last year, finishing at 52-30 and getting a playoff berth, with the first round bringing the Indiana Pacers, as Martin really turned it up in the postseason. It would be a good matchup between Martin and the Pacers' Jermaine O'Neal, but Martin would up his numbers, as he averaged over 19 points and 7 rebounds while shooting nearly 48%, as he would hit double figures in every game. New Jersey would go up 2-1 before Indiana was able to even it after a Game 4 win, setting up a series-deciding Game 5, and Martin would have his best game, as he finished with 29 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists in a win, as New Jersey would advance to a second-round matchup with Charlotte. This series would be a relatively easy gentleman's sweep for the Nets. Martin wasn't as efficient or productive on the offensive end, but he would still hit double figures in all 5 games, yet would never score more than 15 points. And he would also see his rebounds drop significantly, but it was hard for him to get going, as he was often in foul trouble, yet he would still be an effective defender, averaging nearly 1 steal and 2 blocks per game. But now the Nets were heading to the conference finals to take on the Boston Celtics. Martin would have his moments, but overall he would have a less than stellar series. He would put up over 14 points and 7 rebounds per game, along with over a steal and a block, but he would only shoot about 35% from the field and committed a total of 30 personal fouls, as he averaged 5 per game in the 6-game series, fouling out of 2 of the first 3 games. The Nets would win Game 1 even though Martin failed to crack double-figure scoring, yet he would make up for it with 4 blocks. A Game 2 loss saw him go for 22 points and 5 rebounds, but then after putting up just 12 points and 4 rebounds, he would foul out of Game 3, which ended in the Celtics making a legendary fourth-quarter comeback. But after this, the Nets would win the next 3, even though Martin shot a combined 15 of 48 from the field. But now that series was in the past, and the Nets' focus shifted to attempting to spoil the Lakers' shot at a three-peat. Yet even though only one game was decided by more than 6 points, each game was decided in the Lakers' favor, as they would sweep New Jersey. Martin would have 21 points and 6 boards on just 7 of 22 shooting in a close Game 1 loss, but would then struggle with fouls in a Game 2 blowout, as he had just 6 points on 2 of 8 shooting and no blocks, yet would record 3 steals. He would play his best in the final 2 games, as he would drop 26 on nearly 65% shooting, along with 2 steals and 2 blocks in Game 3, and then would do his best to extend the series in Game 4, as he finished with a game-high 35 points on 15 of 28 shooting, along with a game-high 11 rebounds. But New Jersey came up short, and their season ended in disappointment. But for the year, Martin averaged about 15 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. For as good of a season the Nets had last year, they knew they needed an interior presence after being completely dominated by Shaq in the finals, and they were willing to give up some of their top talent. So in the offseason, they shipped Keith Van Horn along with Todd McCullough to the Sixers for a 36-year-old Dikembe Mutombo. And while it was clear what they were trying to do, it wouldn't work out, as a wrist injury would limit him to just 24 regular season games. With Van Horn gone, Jefferson would become a starter, and the trio of him, Kidd, and Martin would combine to average nearly 51 points per game. Martin would put up a career-high scoring average and would up his rebounds by 3 per game. He would hit double figures in 70 games and record 24 double-doubles, as he would score a career-high 35 points on over 72% shooting to go along with 12 rebounds in a February 3rd defeat of Seattle. And a few days before that, on January 29th, he had pulled down a career-high 21 rebounds in a win over Washington. And even without Mutombo, the Nets had the second best scoring defense and best defensive rating in the league. And that was largely due to the Martin, Kidd, and Jefferson trio being elite defensively as well, with all three finishing in the league's top 20 for defensive rating, with Martin's 95.8 rating being 4th in the NBA, as this season would see him average nearly a steal and a block per game. The Nets wouldn't be able to hit 50 wins again, but a 49-33 finish would get them another playoff berth and a first-round matchup with Milwaukee. Martin played like a star in the first round, averaging about 22 and 10 along with a block per game, as he would lead the Nets in all 3 categories for the series. He would start this series by recording at least 21 points in the first 4 games, along with 2 double-doubles, as the teams were tied 2-2. He would have a rough Game 5, recording just 9 points on 3 of 11 shooting, as he would struggle with fouls, yet he would still have 10 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2 blocks in a Nets win. But he came back strong in the closeout Game 6, finishing with a game-high 29 points to go along with 9 rebounds in a win, as the Nets were moving on to face the Celtics. It would end in the same result as last year, as New Jersey would defeat Boston, this time in a sweep, as Martin continued his high-level play, once again leading the team in scoring while finishing second in rebounding and averaging nearly 2 steals and a block per game, as he shot nearly 52% from the field. He would hit double figures in each game, including 3 with at least 20 and 2 double-doubles. However, he would struggle with fouls, as he had just 1 game with less than 5. He would also play over 51 minutes in the Nets' Game 4 double overtime win, as he recorded 22 points and 10 rebounds, and would hit the shot that would eventually force a second overtime. So the Nets were returning to the conference finals, this time versus Detroit. Martin would continue his incredible postseason, as even against the great Pistons defense, he would finish as the Nets' second leading scorer and rebounder on nearly 52% shooting, while playing some great defense of his own, averaging nearly 2 steals and 2 blocks per game. But fouls would again be an issue, as he had just 1 game with less than 5. Even after the Nets took a 2-0 lead, it seemed like anyone's series, as each win had only been by 2 points. But the Nets would win the next 2 by double digits, as overall Martin hit double figures in every game, including a 25.9 rebound Game 2. But after 2 straight sweeps, the Nets were looking hot, as they got ready for their second straight finals appearance, this time taking on the Spurs. This series would already go better for the Nets, as after 4 games they were tied 2-2 with San Antonio, and Martin had been playing great for the most part. He had 21 and 12 with 2 blocks in a Game 1 loss, then had 14 points, 2 steals, and 2 blocks in a Game 2 win. A Game 3 loss saw him record 23 points, 11 rebounds, 4 steals, and 2 blocks, yet he would have 5 fouls. He would have another 5 fouls in Game 4, but would still put up 20 points, 13 boards, and 3 blocks in a win. But over the next 2 games, he would crumble, as a Game 5 loss saw him put up 4 points on 2 of 8 shooting, along with 8 turnovers. And then with their season on the line, he had just 6 points on 3 of 23 shooting, as San Antonio won the game and the title. But Martin's improved year saw him average about 16.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, and a block per game. Mutombo had only appeared in 10 games during the 03 playoffs in a bench role, and over the offseason, the Nets would buy out the remainder of his contract, and they would then sign another veteran defensive center in Alonzo Mourning. However, this would be another swing and a miss, as after appearing in 12 games, Mourning was forced to retire due to a kidney disease, which had forced him to miss all of last season as well. And this was a point of contention between Martin and Mourning early in the year, as after Martin's team won a rebounding drill in practice and then was joking around, it led to Mourning mocking an ankle injury Martin was dealing with, which led to Martin mocking Mourning's kidney issue, which reportedly almost resulted in a fight. But as Martin would later say, he wasn't too worried about his chances in a fight with Mourning after seeing his playoff fight with Larry Johnson. But it's also important to note that Martin did realize he crossed the line and apologized for what he said. But the Nets were again without their top acquisition, yet Martin would step up by putting together his best pro season. Martin would again finish second on the team in scoring, as the trio combined to average nearly 51 points per game. He would also average a career-high 9.5 rebounds per game and shoot a then career-high 48.8%. He would hit double figures in 55 games and record 27 double-doubles, including 2 games with at least 20 boards, and his only career 20-20 game, when he had 20 points and 21 rebounds in a December 5th defeat of Milwaukee. Yet he would also find himself serving a 2-game suspension in early January for a fight with the Clippers' Corey Maggette. Defensively, he remained one of the best in the league, as he finished the season top 5 in defensive rating and would average over a steal and a block per game. And his great season would earn him his first and only All-Star selection, as he would have 17 points off the bench. About halfway through the year, the Nets were atop the Atlantic Division at 22-20, but then it was announced that coach Byron Scott had been fired and replaced with Lawrence Frank, primarily due to a rocky relationship between Scott and Kidd. Under Frank, the team would go 25-15 and win the division for a third straight year, with a 47-35 record, setting up a first-round matchup with New York. Martin would put together the most dominant series of his career in a 4-game sweep of the Knicks. He would lead the Nets in scoring and rebounding, while recording over a steal and block per game, and would shoot over 64% from the field. He would have 16 points and 11 rebounds in Game 1, then follow that with 22 points and a postseason career-high 16 rebounds in Game 2. Game 3 would see him finish with 19 and 15, while Game 4 would be his best, as he had a postseason career-high 36 points along with 13 boards. The second round brought Detroit, and although the series went the full 7 games, Detroit would come out on top. Martin would again lead the team in scoring, but he only pulled down 7 rebounds per game and shot about 42%. However, he would also play a huge part in holding Rasheed Wallace to less than 12 points per game on less than 44% shooting. The Pistons would go up 2-0, as Martin would average 16 points and 8.5 boards. But New Jersey would then win 3 straight, as Martin averaged 17 points and 11 rebounds. But they couldn't get that last win, as Detroit won Games 6 and 7, with Martin averaging 18 points and 9.5 rebounds over the final 2 games, as the Nets came up short on a third straight trip to the finals. But Martin's career year ended with him averaging about 16.5 points, 9.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. But this would unexpectedly be the final year that Martin would wear a Nets jersey. In mid-July, Martin was sent to the Denver Nuggets for 3 first-round picks in a sign-and trade. Reportedly, the Nets wanted to keep Martin, but felt that the 7-year, $92.5 million deal he was going to sign would limit their ability to sign quality players in the future, and they also liked the flexibility that 3 future first-rounders gave them. Martin joined what was shaping up to be a pretty good Nuggets team. They featured veteran point guard Andre Miller and third-year forward Nene, while having one of the league's best defensive players at the center position in Marcus Camby, as he and Martin seemed like they had the potential to be one of the best defensive front courts in the game. And of course, their top player was second-year star Carmelo Anthony. The Nuggets would also go through 3 coaches this year, with the final coach hiring being George Karl, as he would end up having conflict with a few of the players during his time in Denver. Martin's first season in Denver would be his best. He would finish second on the team in scoring and rebounding, and would be the only player to average at least a steal and a block. And he was still able to get out in transition, as Denver played at one of the league's highest paces. Martin would hit double figures in 61 games, including 17 games with at least 20, and 24 double-doubles. But Martin would also miss 12 games this season, as his knee was often bothering him, yet he would play through it as much as he could. He would also make an appearance in the dunk contest. However, it wouldn't be as a dunker. The Nuggets had snuck into the playoffs last season, but prior to the Karl hiring, it wasn't looking like they were going to make a return, as they were sitting at 17-25 in late January. But after they brought in Karl, they would become one of the league's hottest teams, going 32-8 over the final 40 games to finish at 49-33 and get a first-round matchup with San Antonio. Martin wasn't able to recreate his playoff success from last year, as he only averaged about 12.5 points and 5.5 rebounds, but would still record a steal and a block per game. The Nuggets would win Game 1, but after that would fail to win again, as San Antonio won 4 straight to take the series, with Martin's best performance coming in Game 3 when he had 18 points on over 61% shooting. But fouls continued to be an issue, as he would have at least 4 fouls in 4 games, including fouling out of Game 4. But the regular season had seen him average about 15.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, and a block per game. But after the season, it was determined that Martin's knee issues were worse than originally thought. In May, Martin underwent microfracture surgery on his left knee, and in 2005, this was still very much considered a surgery that could alter your career. But surprisingly, Martin was cleared to play by October, which was quite a quick turnaround from such a serious surgery, as Martin would say years later that he should have never been cleared to come back that quickly, as he was not fully healed and only made his knee worse. But he did look healed to begin the year. He would start quite well, hitting double figures in each of the first 6 games, but then his knee pain returned, as he only appeared in 13 of the team's next 23 games. Overall, he would miss 26 games this year due to recurring knee pain, and when he was playing, he didn't always possess his same trademark explosiveness. He would see his numbers drop, as after playing no less than 32.5 minutes per game in each season of his career up to this point, he would only manage about 27.5 minutes this year, as he would fall to the team's 3rd leading scorer, yet would remain their 2nd leading rebounder. He would hit double figures in 39 games, and would record 7 double-doubles, with his best game coming in a February 10th victory over Dallas, when he had a season-high 34 points on 14 of 18 shooting, along with 9 rebounds. On top of being without Martin for 26 games, Camby would also miss 26 games of his own, as Denver's defense saw a noticeable decline, and Martin was really struggling with his knee to end the year, appearing in just 12 of the team's final 22 games, but they were still able to finish with a 44-38 record and get a first-round matchup with the Clippers. Once again, the series would end in 5 games, with Denver on the losing end. Yet Martin had only averaged about 4.5 points and 4.5 rebounds per game. But then you see that he only appeared in the first 2 games, even though he was able to play. But why? Karl would elect to start Francisco Elson over Martin to begin the series, which upset Martin, as he had never come off the bench in the playoffs. After playing about 28 minutes in Game 1, he had gotten less than 7 minutes in the first half of Game 2. So at halftime, he confronted Karl about this, which led to a heated argument. And it got to the point that Martin was looking for a car so he could leave at halftime, as he would eventually be suspended for the remainder of the series for conduct detrimental to the team. And Martin would say on Gil's Arena that he was going to beat up Karl if it weren't for one thing.
I can honestly say, if Latrell Sprewell never had choked PJ Carlissimo, and I knew the result, and I knew like my track record and all that, I would have beat George up, dog.
So Martin's 06 season would end with him averaging about 13 points, 6.5 rebounds, and a block per game. But unfortunately for Martin, he would have knee issues again, and the 07 season would basically be a wash for him. Martin was a starter to begin the year and had recorded double-digit rebounds in both games with 1 double-double. But then soon after that, it was announced that he required another microfracture surgery, but this time on his right knee, as it would bring his 07 season to an early end. The Nuggets would still finish 45-37, but would lose to the Spurs in round 1. But Martin's 2 games would see him average about 9.5 points and 10 rebounds per game. But now Martin was in a tough position for his career. Not only was there a significant rift between him and his coach, but he was now a player trying to return from back-to-back major knee surgeries, as he was starting to be looked at as not only an injury-prone player, but also a bad trade decision for Denver. But he would return in 2008, wearing his college number 4, as it was a fresh start after an injury-riddled few years, and a great comeback season was in his future. Martin's comeback would mark what is believed to be the first player to return from microfracture surgery on both knees. On top of Martin playing and starting 71 games this year, which would be his final season playing at least 70 games, Marcus Camby also had his healthiest season in years, playing and starting 79 games and winning Defensive Player of the Year. But the Nuggets were offensive juggernauts, mainly because their elite scoring duo of Carmelo Anthony and Allen Iverson, as they had acquired Iverson in December of last season, and they would also get great bench production from J.R. Smith, who they had acquired prior to last season. Nene would play in just 16 games this year, but the Nuggets still had more than enough to compete. Martin would benefit from the paint being more open due to the attention that Anthony and Iverson demanded on the perimeter, as it allowed him to excel on screen and rolls and get some easy putbacks off misses, as this season would see him shoot 53.8% from the field, which was a career high in any season in which he played at least 20 games. He would hit double figures in 43 games and record 10 double-doubles, with his best game coming in a March 29th win over Golden State, when he had 30 points and 11 rebounds. And he would return to averaging over a steal and a block per game. Denver had the second worst scoring defense, but the second best scoring offense, as they would go 50-32, which would only be good for the 8th seed in a competitive Western Conference. And the first round would bring a hungry Lakers team, and Denver was no match, as LA swept them with ease. Martin gave the team valuable minutes, but would put up modest numbers of about 9 points and 6.5 rebounds per game, while shooting about 44%, as his best performance would come in Game 3, when he had 12 points and 7 rebounds on 6 of 11 shooting. But it was yet another first-round exit for Denver, as Martin's year ended with him averaging about 12.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. Camby was gone going into 2009, which was a big change, but an even bigger change would occur after 3 games on November 3rd, when Iverson was sent to Detroit for a package headlined by Chauncey Billups. which ended up being a great trade by Denver. Martin turned in another relatively healthy year as he would play and start in 66 games and give the team his usual contributions. He would hit double figures in 43 games and record 5 double-doubles, but with Billups running the offense, the Nuggets were playing great. And even after losing Camby, they had an improved defense, as they would finish with the best record of Martin's time there at 54-28, which got them a first-round matchup versus New Orleans, as they were about to go on an impressive playoff run. The first round brought the Hornets, and Martin would put together a solid and efficient series, as he averaged about 10 points and 6 rebounds on nearly 55% shooting, which included a 12-point, 10-rebound double-double in a Game 3 loss. And even though David West led the Hornets in scoring, Martin made him work for it, as he would only shoot 40% from the field, with Denver taking the series in 5. Round 2 brought the Mavs, which would be another solid series for Martin, as he put up about 10 points, 4 rebounds, and 1.5 steals on 50% shooting. And even with Dirk dominating, the Nuggets would go up 3-0 in the series before closing it out in 5 games. So Martin was making his first conference finals appearance since 2003, this time getting a rematch with the Lakers. Martin again continued to play well, averaging about 12.5 points and 7 rebounds on nearly 47% shooting, while also averaging over a steal and a block per game, as he would hit double figures in all but one game of the series, including a 13-point, 15-rebound double-double in a Game 4 win. And after 4 games, the series was tied, but LA would lock in and take the next 2, as they eliminated Denver in 6, with Martin's season seeing him average about 11.5 points, 6 rebounds, and a block per game. The 2010 Nuggets were bringing back the same core in hopes of making it out of the West, but Martin's knees and various other injuries continued to limit him, as his game totals would drop even lower, playing and starting in just 58 games this year. And although his scoring would be roughly the same at around 12 points per game, he had a resurgent season on the glass, as he averaged nearly 9.5 rebounds to lead the team, while still averaging over a steal and a block per game. He would hit double figures in 35 games and record 23 double-doubles, including a vintage 18-point, 17-rebound performance in a February 18th win versus Cleveland. The Nuggets would end up going 53-29, but they were without Martin for most of the final quarter of the season. He would miss 17 straight games near the end of the year due to knee issues and requiring blood treatment, but he was back for the playoffs as a starter, playing over 34 minutes per game. He would give Denver his usual solid production of about 10 points and 8 rebounds on 48% shooting, while adding over a steal and a block per game, but Utah would jump out to a 3-1 lead before winning the series in 6, as Carlos Boozer and Paul Millsap would dominate, and Martin's season ended with him averaging about 11.5 points, 9.5 rebounds, and a block per game. Unfortunately for Martin, he would undergo yet another knee surgery in the offseason, and it was after this surgery that it became apparent the impact his bad knees were having on him. Martin was back for Denver in 2011, but wouldn't play his first game until late December. He still started each of the 48 games he played, but was getting less than 26 minutes per game and averaging single-digit scoring for the first time in his career. Yet he would do it efficiently, shooting over 51%. He would only hit double figures in 22 games and record 3 double-doubles. Denver was still looking good, but they knew their star wanted to change. So on February 22nd, they would send both Anthony and Chauncey Billups to the Knicks in a 3-team trade, as they were clearly trending towards a rebuild. They were still 33-25 at the time of the trade and would go 17-7 the rest of the way, as they finished at 50-32 and got a first-round matchup with OKC. Martin would play well, as he would start every game and put up about 12 points and 8 rebounds on 48% shooting. But the Nuggets just couldn't compete with the Thunder's star power, as they fell in 5 games. And for the regular season, Martin would average about 8.5 points, 5 rebounds, and half a block per game. But a now 33-year-old Martin was a free agent, and he wanted a change too. He would definitely get a change, but likely not what he was expecting, as due to the NBA lockout which occurred over the summer, Martin would sign to play in China in late September, and the NBA lockout would end in late November, so Martin wouldn't be in China long, as on Christmas Eve he would leave the team for personal reasons and would never return, as he would eventually be granted his release on February 2nd, then sign with the Clippers the next day, reuniting him with Chauncey Billups. Martin would sign on to provide depth and a veteran presence to a Clippers team in the prime of their Lob City era. He would put up modest numbers off the bench in 42 games, but he would have a memorable moment against his former coach on April 16th, when he had a go-ahead tip late in the game versus the Nuggets, followed by a clutch block the next possession to help the Clippers to a win, as overall they would go 40-26 and get a first-round matchup with Memphis. The Clippers would win the series in 7, as Martin would appear in all 7 games off the bench, giving them valuable two-way minutes, as he would average close to 5 points and 3.5 rebounds on nearly 60% shooting, while also averaging nearly 2 blocks per game. Round 2 would bring the Spurs, but the Clippers wouldn't be so lucky, as they would be swept, with Martin still giving the team about 4 points, 3 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. But his regular season would see him average about 5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and a block per game. Martin was a free agent after the season and would remain unsigned until late February, when he agreed to a 10-day contract with New York, as this would reunite him with former Nets teammate Jason Kidd and former Nuggets teammates like Carmelo Anthony and J.R. Smith. Martin provided the team with much-needed depth as big men Amare Stoudemire and Tyson Chandler dealt with injuries, as not only would Martin appear in 18 games, he would start 11 of them and put up over 7 points and 5 rebounds per game on over 60% shooting. The Knicks were 32-20 when they signed Martin, and his great play eventually earned him a contract for the remainder of the season in mid-March, as overall they would finish at 54-28 and get a first-round matchup with Boston. Martin would come off the bench for the series, but continue his productive play, putting up about 4.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game on over 52% shooting, as the Knicks would win in 6 and get the Pacers in round 2. The series would also go 6 games, but the Knicks would be on the losing end, as in a slightly larger role, Martin would give the team about 7 points, 3.5 rebounds, and a block and a half on over 62% shooting. But his brief regular season would see him average about 7 points, 5.5 rebounds, and a block per game. Martin's great play earned him a new 1-year deal for the 2014 season, but he would injure his ankle in mid-January after playing in 30 of the team's first 39 games. He would play 2 more games after the injury, with his final game coming on February 1st, as after this, he would not appear for the team again, as they finished at 37-45 and missed the playoffs. But for the regular season, he would average about 4.5 points, 4 rebounds, and a block per game. Martin was again a free agent and would eventually sign on with Milwaukee a couple months into the 2015 season. It would only be a 10-day contract, yet again he would earn a contract for the remainder of the season in late January. But then just a few weeks later, the Bucks released Martin, as for his brief season he averaged about 2 points, 1.5 rebounds, and half a block per game. But that would mark the end of Kenyon Martin's NBA career. His stock was at its highest during his senior year in college, but a freak injury meant his future was up in the air. Yet the Nets still took a chance, based off of the player he was before the injury, and they likely didn't regret it, as in his first 4 seasons, he was one of the best two-way players in the league, and brought a much-needed toughness to those teams. Acquiring Jason Kidd was the best thing for his career, as his skill set fit perfectly with Kidd, and it was clearly effective, as he helped lead the team to back-to-back finals appearances. It looked like the Nuggets were getting a player at the top of his game who was only going to improve, but injuries and coach conflict more so defined Martin's stint in Denver. But even with everything he dealt with, he continued to produce on both ends of the floor when he could play. He spent his last few years in bench roles, but playing limited minutes allowed him to go all out and produce at an exceptional level, as from the beginning to the end, he was effective. He definitely had a reputation as a dirty player, but his intimidation factor was invaluable, and he always needed to set the tone, and he was ready for any retaliation. Kenyon Martin was an athletic freak, and before injury was a complete mismatch, but he also knew how to adjust to injuries and a changing league, which kept him around for 15 years. And that's an impressive accomplishment in itself. But that's it for today's episode on K-Mart. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out these ones on a couple of his Nets teammates. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.